Queen Anne of Great Britain is a monarch whose reign shaped history, but few people know of the personal torment that defined much of her life. Behind the crown, behind the politics, lay a heartbreaking struggle, one that no amount of power could protect her from. For Queen Anne, the throne she occupied was not nearly as heavy as the weight of her own grief. Over the course of her life, she became pregnant 17 times. But tragically, only one of those children survived past infancy. It's a story of loss upon loss, year after year. The queen, who should have been surrounded by children, heirs to her great legacy, was instead haunted by the cries of the infants she never got to raise. Anne's story is not just about the political complexities of her time, it's about the very human suffering she endured in silence. As a mother who outlived nearly all of her children, Anne's one surviving child, William, Duke of Gloucester, was her hope for the future. He was born in 1689, and though he survived past infancy, William was a sickly child, plagued by health issues from the moment he was born. And even that hope was cruelly taken away from her. William died at the age of 11. The heartbreak was almost too much to bear, and it devastated Queen Anne. So, what caused this tragic cycle of loss? For centuries, historians speculated. Was it simply the poor medical practices of the time? Was it some hereditary condition? Or was Queen Anne simply the victim of unimaginable misfortune? Today, however, researchers believe they may have uncovered the heartbreaking reason behind Anne's numerous pregnancies and devastating losses. In recent years, medical experts have begun to theorize that Queen Anne may have suffered from a genetic condition known as Antiphospholipid Syndrome, or APS. This condition wasn't known in Anne's time, but it's now recognized as a disorder that causes recurrent miscarriages, blood clots, and other complications during pregnancy. APS could explain why Anne's pregnancies so often ended in stillbirth or premature death. Antiphospholipid syndrome is an autoimmune disorder in which the body mistakenly creates antibodies that attack healthy tissues, particularly in the blood vessels. For a pregnant woman, these antibodies can cause blood clots that interfere with the placenta, depriving the baby of essential nutrients and oxygen. In the case of Queen Anne, this condition may have been the reason for her many miscarriages and stillbirths, and the poor health of her surviving son. Sadly, medical knowledge in Anne's time was not advanced enough to diagnose or treat such a condition. She had no way of knowing what was causing her losses, no way to prevent them. Instead, she had to endure the endless cycle of hope and heartbreak. All while ruling over a kingdom that demanded her attention and strength. Imagine the strength it took for her to continue her duties as queen, while privately grieving the loss of so many children. The pressure of ruling a nation, maintaining political alliances, and dealing with the factions within her own court, all while silently mourning the baby she lost. Anne was often described as a difficult, stubborn monarch, but it's no surprise that her personality was shaped by her suffering. Her personal tragedies didn't go unnoticed by those around her either. Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough, one of Anne's closest friends and confidants, once wrote of the Queen's overwhelming grief and isolation. Their relationship became strained in later years, and some suggest that the constant strain of loss contributed to the deterioration of their once strong bond. It's heartbreaking to think that, in her most desperate moments, Anne felt alone, even in the company of those who were supposed to support her. And as time went on, Anne's health deteriorated. Her body, already weakened by numerous pregnancies, began to fail her. By the end of her life, she suffered from gout, obesity, and debilitating pain. When Queen Anne died in 1714, at the age of 49, she left no heir to succeed her. Her reign, which had been marked by significant political changes and military victories, would forever be overshadowed by the personal tragedies that defined her life. 17 pregnancies, 17 moments of hope, only to end in sorrow. And now, centuries later, we are only just beginning to understand the reason behind her endless suffering. Queen Anne's story is a reminder that even the most powerful figures in history are not immune to the frailties of life. Behind the crown, behind the royal titles, she was a mother, one who endured more heartbreak than any parent should ever have to. And while we may never fully grasp the depth of her suffering, modern science has brought us one step closer to understanding the cruel fate she endured. In the end, her story is not just one of monarchy, it's one of unimaginable loss, and the strength it takes to keep going, even when everything has been taken from you. As we delve deeper into Queen Anne's life, it's essential to recognize the immense emotional toll that shaped not only her reign but her identity as a person. Her physical ailments were only part of the suffering, her true battle was within. After enduring the loss of so many children, many historians believe that Queen Anne's psyche was deeply affected. It's said that the weight of her grief, combined with the pressures of ruling a nation, often left her in a state of emotional exhaustion. Grief has a way of isolating even the most powerful individuals. For Queen Anne, this isolation extended not only to her family life but also to her political relationships. Her friendship with Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough, is one of the most well-known relationships in British history. What began as a close, personal bond between queen and confidant eventually crumbled under the weight of personal and political tension. Sarah was one of the few people who truly knew Queen Anne, the woman behind the crown. She was privy to Anne's vulnerabilities, her fears, and her sorrow. But as Anne's personal losses mounted, so did the strain on their friendship. Sarah, known for her assertive and often domineering nature, struggled to reconcile the Queen's increasing emotional fragility with her own ambitions. The more Anne withdrew into herself, the more Sarah pushed, leading to one of the most dramatic and publicized fallouts in British history. Their rift was more than just personal, it had political consequences. Sarah Churchill had significant influence over Anne's decisions, but as their relationship soured, Anne sought solace in new friendships, particularly with Abigail Masson, a cousin of Sarah. This shift in Anne's inner circle caused further tension, contributing to a political divide that had lasting effects on the government of the time. The political battles between the Marlboroughs and Massons are well documented. But what we often overlook is how Queen Anne's personal grief affected her decision-making. The loss of her children not only altered her emotionally, but it also made her cling to those she trusted most. Her reliance on Abigail Masson wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. Abigail became Anne's emotional support during some of the darkest periods of her life. By the time Queen Anne reached her final years, her health had deteriorated significantly. Her body, already ravaged by the toll of multiple pregnancies and emotional stress, began to give way under the strain. She was plagued by gout, severe obesity, and mobility issues that left her bedridden for much of the time. Yet, despite her physical decline, she continued to perform her duties as queen, until her death in 1714. Queen Anne's death marked the end of the Stuart line. With no surviving children, the crown passed to the House of Hanover, ushering in a new era for Britain. But the end of her reign didn't mark the end of her legacy. In the centuries that followed, historians, biographers, and researchers have continued to study her life, piecing together the complexities of her character, her reign, and her personal sorrows. Now, as we look back with the benefit of modern medicine, we see how Anne's story might have been different. With today's understanding of autoimmune diseases like APS, it's possible that her pregnancies could have been managed differently, that her children might have survived. But for Anne, those advancements came centuries too late. What she endured was not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of the limits of medical knowledge in her time. Queen Anne's suffering reminds us of how far we've come in our understanding of medicine and pregnancy, but also of the timeless nature of grief. No amount of power, wealth, or influence could shield her from the pain of losing her children. And in that way, her story becomes universal. She was not just a queen, she was a mother, a woman who faced unimaginable loss and continued to carry the weight of her crown. As we reflect on Queen Anne's life, it's important to remember her not only as a monarch but as a human being who lived with immense sorrow. Her story serves as a reminder that behind every historical figure, behind every ruler, there is a person with dreams, heartache, and struggles. In Queen Anne, we see the tragic blend of power and vulnerability, a queen whose reign was marked by both political victories and profound personal loss. Thank you for joining me in uncovering the hidden truths behind Queen Anne's reign. If you found this story meaningful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, as we continue to explore the untold stories of history's most captivating figures.